I never believed those stories about chance encounters changing your life until I found myself standing at a bread booth in Portland's farmers market, laughing at something a stranger said that made my heart skip in ways I thought I'd forgotten. Some moments arrive quietly, like morning mist rolling in from the coast, while others hit you like Oregon rain in November, sudden and transformative. This was definitely the latter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Michelle, and at 53, I thought I had figured out most of life's surprises. After 22 years of marriage that ended 3 years ago, followed by a string of awkward coffee dates with men my age who seemed more interested in talking about their cholesterol levels than their dreams, I had settled into a comfortable routine. Marketing consulting paid the bills, my Pearl District apartment had the perfect view of the Willamette River, and Saturday mornings at the farmer's market had become my sacred ritual. That particular September morning carried the crisp promise of autumn, with maple leaves just beginning their transformation from green to gold. The market buzzed with its usual energy, vendors calling out specials while customers meandered between stalls, canvas bags in hand. I had my routine down to a science, starting with Helen's organic vegetables, moving to the flower stand for my weekly bouquet, then ending at the coffee cart before heading home to grade myself on another successfully independent weekend. Everything changed when I detoured to investigate the new bread booth. The aroma drew me in first, that intoxicating blend of fresh yeast and butter that speaks directly to your soul. Behind the table stood a man who looked to be in his mid-30s, flour, dusting his forearms, dark hair slightly tousled like he'd been working since dawn. His eyes were the color of strong coffee, and when he smiled at approaching customers, laugh lines crinkled at the corners in a way that suggested he did it often. I found myself studying the display of artisan loaves and pastries with more attention than they probably deserved, stealing glances at this baker who seemed completely absorbed in his craft. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from loving what you do, explaining the difference between his sourdough starter and traditional yeast breads, to an elderly couple with genuine enthusiasm. When the couple moved on, he turned, those coffee-colored eyes to me. "First time at the market?" he asked, wiping his hands on a flour-streaked apron. "Oh no, I'm a regular," I replied, surprised by how easily conversation flowed. "Just haven't seen your booth before." "Ryan," he said, extending a surprisingly soft hand for someone who worked with his hands all day. "This is week 3 of my grand experiment in leaving the corporate world to become a bread maker." "Michelle," I responded, shaking his hand, and noticing how warm his palm felt against mine. "That's quite a leap. What made you decide to trade suits for sourdough?" His laugh was genuine, not the polished chuckle I'd grown accustomed to from the divorced dads on dating apps. Life's too short to spend it in conference rooms talking about quarterly projections when you could be creating something people actually enjoy. He gestured to a beautiful braided challah. "This makes people happy in a way that spreadsheets never could." Something about his honesty disarmed me. In my world of marketing strategies and client presentations, authenticity felt rare. "I can appreciate that sentiment," I said. "Though I have to admit, my relationship with bread is more consumer than creator." "Well, that's equally important," Ryan said, selecting a small loaf from the display. "Try this." He tore off a piece of what looked like herb-crusted focaccia and handed it to me. The bread was extraordinary, warm and fragrant with rosemary and olive oil. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the taste, and when I opened them, Ryan was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That's incredible," I said, meaning it. "You made this?" "Started the dough at 4 this morning," he said with obvious pride. "There's something magical about working while the city sleeps, watching the sunrise through the kitchen window while the bread rises." We talked for another 10 minutes about his transition from corporate life, my own career in marketing, the challenges of starting over. I learned he'd left a project management position at Nike, that he'd been experimenting with bread recipes for years before taking the plunge, that his family thought he'd lost his mind, but his friends were supportive. "What about you?" he asked as I selected a loaf of his signature sourdough. "Ever think about making a dramatic life change?" I laughed, handing him cash for the bread. At my age, dramatic changes usually involve medical procedures or retirement. Planning. Your age? Ryan looked genuinely puzzled. "You can't be more than 40. The compliment caught me off guard, warming me more than the September sun on my shoulders. "That's very kind, but I'm 53 and perfectly comfortable admitting it." Ryan's eyebrows shot up, but not in the dismissive way I'd grown used to. Instead, he looked impressed. "Seriously? Wow. You know what?" He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "If you were 42, I'd propose right here in front of the tomato stand." The comment was so unexpected, so charmingly ridiculous, that I burst out laughing. "You would you?" I managed between giggles. "Well, I'm 53. Is that a deal breaker?" The question hung in the air between us, playful but loaded with more weight than either of us had intended. Ryan's expression shifted, becoming more serious, more considering. Around us, the market continued its Saturday rhythm, but something had changed in our small corner of the world. "You know what?" he said finally, that genuine smile returning. "I don't think it is." The moment stretched between us, charged with possibility and the kind of electric uncertainty that makes your stomach flutter like you're 16 again. I felt my cheeks warming, suddenly aware of my heartbeat in a way that seemed both thrilling and terrifying. "Michelle!" A familiar voice broke through the moment. Lisa, my neighbor and closest friend, appeared at my elbow carrying a basket overflowing with vegetables. "I've been looking everywhere for you. The flower vendor said you already came and went." "Hi, Lisa," I said, trying to regain my composure while acutely aware that Ryan was still watching me with those thoughtful eyes. "This is Ryan. He's the new bread vendor." Lisa, with her protective instincts and ability to read situations, like a detective novel, immediately assessed the scene. Her smile was polite, but measuring as she shook Ryan's hand. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Nice to meet you. Michelle mentioned the market had some new vendors." "Actually, we just met," I clarified, though something about the way Ryan looked at me made it feel like we'd known each other longer than 20 minutes. "Well," Lisa said, clearly ready to extract me from whatever situation she'd wandered into, "we should probably head to the coffee cart before the line gets crazy." I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the sourdough loaf in my hands. "It was wonderful meeting you, Ryan. I'll definitely be back for more bread." "I hope so," he said, and something in his tone suggested he meant more than just the baking. As Lisa and I walked away, I could feel his eyes following us. My friend waited exactly 30 seconds before the interrogation began. "Okay, what was that about?" she demanded. "And don't tell me it was just about bread, because I saw the way you two were looking at each other." I felt heat creeping up my neck. "It was nothing, just friendly conversation with a vendor." "Michelle," Lisa stopped walking and turned to face me. "I've known you for 8 years. You don't blush over friendly conversation about baked goods." The truth was, I didn't know what had just happened either. All I knew was that a 35-year-old baker had just made me feel more alive in 20 minutes than I had in months of carefully orchestrated coffee dates with age-appropriate men. And that terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. "He's young, Lisa," I said quietly as we resumed walking. "So?" she replied with characteristic bluntness. "You're not dead." But as we approached the coffee cart, my mind was spinning with questions I wasn't ready to answer. What did it mean that a man 11 years younger had just joked about proposing? More importantly, what did it mean that part of me had wanted to say yes? The coffee that morning tasted different, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Lisa. And I claimed our usual spot at a weathered picnic table near the fountain. But my attention kept drifting back toward the bread booth where Ryan was helping customers with the same easy warmth he'd shown me. "Earth to Michelle," Lisa said, waving, her hand in front of my face. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. Staring, like a teenager with her first crush. Lisa's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a little harmless flirtation, but you need to be realistic here." Her words stung more than they should have. Realistic about what, exactly? "Come on, Michelle. He's a kid starting a new business. You're an established professional. He probably flirts with every woman who buys his bread. It's good for sales." I wanted to argue with her, to insist that what had happened between Ryan and me felt different, but doubt crept in like morning fog. Maybe Lisa was right. Maybe I'd misread the entire interaction, projecting meaning onto what was simply friendly, customer service with a side of harmless charm. The rest of the weekend passed in a haze of second-guessing. I found myself thinking about Ryan at odd moments, remembering the way his eyes had lit up when I laughed, the genuine interest in his voice when he asked about my life. But Lisa's words echoed in my head, mixing with my own insecurities about age and relevance in ways that left me feeling foolish. Monday morning brought the familiar comfort of routine. Client calls, strategy meetings, the controlled chaos of my marketing consulting business. I threw myself into work with extra intensity, as if professional accomplishment could somehow validate my worth in ways that personal connections apparently couldn't. It was Derek who changed everything. I was grabbing lunch at the Daily Grind, my favorite coffee shop near the office, when I overheard a conversation at the table behind me. Two men were discussing weekend plans, and one voice made me freeze, mid-sip. "I'm telling you, man, she was incredible," the familiar voice said. "Smart, funny, absolutely beautiful. And when I made that stupid joke about proposing, she just rolled with it. Most women would have thought I was insane." "So, ask her out," replied another voice. "What's the worst that could happen?" "She's older than me. Like, significantly older. I don't want her to think I'm some kind of immature kid playing games." I turned slightly in my chair, confirming what I already knew. Ryan sat at the corner table with a man about his age, both hunched, over laptops and coffee cups. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized he was talking about me. "Dude," his friend said, "since when do you care about age? Remember when you dated Sarah and she was 10 years older?" "This is different," Ryan replied, running his hands through his hair in a gesture I was beginning to recognize. "Sarah was 35. This woman is 53, and she's got this whole sophisticated life figured out. I'm a guy who just quit his job to sell bread at farmers markets." "So? Maybe she's looking for something real instead of another corporate drone." Their conversation continued, but I couldn't process the words anymore. Ryan had been thinking about me, talking about me to his friends. The connection I'd felt hadn't been one-sided imagination after all. I left the coffee shop before they noticed me, my mind spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. Back at my office, I stared at my computer screen without seeing it, replaying every moment from Saturday morning. The way Ryan had looked at me when I tasted his focaccia. The pause before he'd answered my question about age being a deal-breaker. The sincerity in his voice when he'd said it wasn't. But along with the flutter of excitement came a wave of practical concerns. What did a 35-year-old man really want with someone my age? Lisa's warnings mixed with my own experience of feeling invisible in a youth-obsessed dating world. Even if Ryan's interest was genuine, what kind of future could we realistically have? The internal debate raged for days. I found myself taking different routes to avoid the daily grind, afraid of another accidental encounter before I figured out how I felt. Work became my refuge, client projects demanding enough attention to temporarily quiet the chaos in my head. Thursday evening, I was reviewing campaign proposals when my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Emergency wine night, my place, 8 p.m., non-negotiable. I arrived to find her apartment filled with the warm aroma of her famous pasta sauce, and 2 bottles of Oregon Pinot Noir already breathing on the counter. Lisa hugged me tighter than usual, studying my face with concern. "You look terrible," she said with characteristic bluntness. "When's the last time you slept?" "Thanks for the pep talk," I replied, accepting the glass of wine she pressed into my hands. "I've been busy with work." "Bullshit. You've been overthinking something, and I have a feeling I know what it is." Lisa settled onto her couch, patting the cushion beside her. "Talk to me." The wine loosened my tongue, and soon the whole story came tumbling out. The coffee shop encounter, Ryan's conversation with his friend, my confusion about what any of it meant. Lisa listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from skepticism to something approaching understanding. "So he's been thinking about you too," she said when I finished. "That changes things." "Does it? I mean, what am I supposed to do with that information? March back to the farmer's market and announce that I overheard him talking about me?" Lisa laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her all week. "God, no. That would be mortifying for everyone involved." She paused, swirling wine in her glass. "But maybe you could just go buy more bread. You know, normal customer behavior." The suggestion hung between us, both simple and terrifying. What if it's awkward? What if he regrets what he said about age not being a deal breaker? "Then you buy bread and leave," Lisa said practically. "But what if he doesn't regret it? What if he's been hoping you'd come back?" I spent Friday in a state of nervous energy that my assistant, Rebecca, definitely noticed. She kept shooting me concerned glances during meetings, and finally cornered me by the coffee machine around 3 p.m. "Boss, are you okay? You seem really distracted today." Rebecca was 28, brilliant at social media strategy, and had the kind of refreshing directness that I usually appreciated. Today, it made me feel ancient. "Just thinking through some personal stuff," I said, trying to sound casual. "Guy stuff?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Because you have that look." "What look?" "The look women get when they're trying to talk themselves out of something they actually want to do." Rebecca stirred sugar into her coffee thoughtfully. "My mom gets the same expression when she's debating whether to text this guy she met at her book club." The comparison to her mother's dating life hit like a cold splash of reality. Was that what I'd become? A middle-aged woman flustering over text messages and farmers market encounters? "It's complicated," I said finally. "The best ones usually are," Rebecca replied. "But if it helps, I've never seen you this worked up over anything that wasn't about work. Must be pretty special." Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Pacific Northwest autumn weather that matched my mood perfectly. I stood in my closet for 20 minutes, changing outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft sweater that made me feel confident without trying too hard. The farmer's market buzzed with its usual weekend energy, though the threat of rain had thinned the crowd slightly. I forced myself to follow my normal routine, starting with Helen's vegetables and working my way through the stalls with deliberate casualness. When I finally approached Ryan's booth, my heart was beating so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. He was arranging pastries in the display case, that familiar concentration on his face. When he looked up and saw me, his entire expression changed, lighting up with such genuine pleasure that my doubts evaporated instantly. "Michelle," he said, straightening with a smile that reached his eyes. "I was hoping you'd come back." The simple admission hung between us, honest and vulnerable, in a way that made my chest tight with unexpected emotion. Around us, the market continued its Saturday rhythm, but something had shifted again in our small corner of the world. "Well," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I do need bread. That sourdough disappeared faster than I expected." "I'm glad to hear it," Ryan said, moving to select a loaf. "I've been experimenting with new recipes this week. Want to try something different?" As he described his latest creation, a rosemary olive oil bread that sounded divine, I realized Lisa had been wrong about one thing. This wasn't just friendly customer service or harmless flirtation. The way Ryan looked at me, talked to me, made me feel seen in ways I'd forgotten were possible. "Actually," I found myself saying, "I was wondering if you might want to grab coffee. Sometime. You know, away from the market." The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him. Ryan's eyes widened slightly, then that wonderful smile spread across his face again. "I would love that," he said without hesitation. "When?" The coffee date that following Tuesday felt like stepping into uncharted territory. We met at a small place in the Alberta Arts District that Ryan suggested, somewhere neither of us had history or expectations. I arrived first, choosing a table by the window where afternoon light filtered through rain-streaked glass, casting everything in soft, uncertain shadows. When Ryan walked in, shaking droplets from his jacket, I felt that familiar flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. He'd traded his flour-dusted apron for dark jeans and a button-down shirt that brought out the warmth in his eyes. Seeing him outside the context of the farmer's market made everything feel both more real and more surreal. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "The lunch rush at the bakery ran longer than expected." "You have a bakery?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "I thought you just did the farmer's market." Ryan's cheeks flushed. Slightly. "It's not really a bakery yet. More like a shared commercial kitchen space where I rent time to do my prep work. But yeah, eventually I want to open my own place." The conversation flowed easier than I'd expected. We talked about his dreams for the bakery, my consulting business, the challenges of starting over in your 30s versus your 50s. Ryan listened with genuine interest when I described some of my larger campaigns, asking thoughtful questions that showed he understood the strategic complexity behind what others might dismiss as just advertising. "So you basically help companies figure out how to tell their story," he said, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug. "That's not that different from what I'm trying to do with bread." "How so?" "Every loaf tells a story about tradition, craftsmanship, taking time to do things right. The challenge is communicating that to people who are used to grabbing whatever's fastest off the grocery store shelf." His insight impressed me. Too many men I'd dated seemed threatened by my professional success, or dismissive of marketing, as somehow less legitimate than their own careers. Ryan treated my expertise with respect while drawing genuine parallels to his own work. The easy conversation continued for over an hour, meandering through topics like Portland's changing neighborhoods, favorite books, and the peculiar challenge of making friends as an adult. It wasn't until Ryan's phone buzzed insistently that the outside world intruded. "Sorry," he said, glancing at the screen with a frown. "It's my business partner. I should probably take this." While he stepped outside to talk, I found myself studying my reflection in the window. Did I look as happy as I felt? The woman staring back seemed younger somehow, more animated than the careful professional mask I usually wore. But underneath the glow of connection lurked persistent questions about what exactly we were doing. Ryan returned looking frustrated. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just some complications with the kitchen rental. My partner thinks we should look for a cheaper space, but the current place has equipment I can't afford to buy outright." He sat down heavily. "Sorry, I don't mean to dump business problems on you. Actually, that's exactly the kind of challenge I help clients navigate all the time. Have you considered a lease-to-own arrangement for equipment, or looked into small business development loans?" Ryan's expression shifted to something approaching awe. "You really know this stuff, don't you?" "It's what I do," I said simply, though his admiration warmed me more than it probably should have. We talked through his business challenges for another 30 minutes, and I found myself genuinely excited about his vision. Ryan wasn't just someone playing at entrepreneurship. He had solid instincts and genuine passion, qualities that were surprisingly attractive in a world full of people who seemed to drift through their careers without real purpose. When we finally parted ways, Ryan hesitated on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop. "I know this might sound presumptuous, but would you like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere nicer than this?" The invitation hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us had fully acknowledged. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Great," Ryan said, his relief obvious. "I'll call you." The next few days passed in a strange, suspended animation. I caught myself checking my phone more often than usual, wondering when Ryan would call and what I'd say when he did. Lisa noticed my distraction immediately when she stopped by my office Thursday afternoon. "You're glowing," she announced, settling into the chair across from my desk. "This is either really good news or you've developed a vitamin deficiency." "We had coffee," I admitted. "It went well. Define well. We talked for 2 hours. He asked me to dinner." Lisa studied my face with the intensity of someone reading a complex contract. "And you said yes?" I said yes. "Okay," she said, slowly. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. What do you want from this?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you looking for a fun distraction? Or are you actually considering a relationship with someone 11 years younger? Because those are very different things with very different consequences." I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was, I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. The idea of a real relationship with Ryan felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. "I don't know," I said finally. "I'm trying to take it one day at a time." "That's fair," Lisa said. "Just promise me you'll be honest with yourself about what you can handle, and honest with him about your expectations." That evening, Ryan called while I was making dinner. The sound of his voice through the phone sent an unexpected jolt of warmth through me. "How does Saturday night sound for dinner?" he asked. "I found this place in the Pearl District that's supposed to have incredible Northwest cuisine." "Saturday works," I said, stirring pasta sauce with more concentration than it required. "Should I meet you there?" "Actually, I was hoping I could pick you up. I know it's old-fashioned, but I'd like to do this properly." The word properly made my chest tight with something I couldn't quite name. When had anyone last wanted to do anything properly with me? Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn evening that made Portland feel magical. I spent longer than usual getting ready, finally settling on a dress that struck the right balance between elegant and approachable. When Ryan knocked on my door, I felt like a teenager preparing for prom. He looked devastatingly handsome in a dark suit that fit him perfectly, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers that made me smile. "These are beautiful," I said, accepting the flowers. "How did you know I love sunflowers?" "Lucky guess," he said, though his pleased expression suggested more thought than luck. The restaurant was intimate without being overly romantic, with warm lighting and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged conversation. Ryan had clearly put effort into the choice, and I found myself appreciating the care he'd taken. "I have to confess something," Ryan said after we'd ordered wine. "I asked Derek to help me pick this place. I wanted to make sure it was somewhere you'd enjoy." "Derek's your friend from the coffee shop?" I asked, remembering the overheard conversation. Ryan nodded. "He's been my reality check throughout this whole career transition. Also my dating advisor, apparently." "And what did your dating advisor tell you about tonight?" "To be myself and try not to overthink everything." Ryan smiled sheepishly. The not overthinking part isn't going so well. His honesty was disarming. For what it's worth, I'm overthinking everything too. Really? You seem so composed? Years of practice, I said. Marketing teaches you to project confidence even when you have no idea what you're doing. Our conversation over dinner felt different from coffee, deeper somehow. Ryan talked about his family, his parents' initial reaction to his career change, his sister's wedding next month where he'd have to defend his life choices to relatives who still didn't understand. I found myself sharing more than I usually did on dates, telling him about my divorce, the challenge of rebuilding my social life, the unexpected loneliness of being suddenly single after decades of marriage. "Do you regret it?" Ryan asked gently. "The divorce?" "No," I said without hesitation. David and I grew into different people who wanted different things. It was painful, but it was right. I paused, considering how much to reveal. The hardest part was realizing I'd spent so many years being half of a couple that I'd forgotten how to be just me. And now I'm still figuring that out. The evening continued with the kind of easy intimacy that develops between people who genuinely like each other. We shared dessert, lingered over coffee, found excuses to extend the night. When Ryan finally drove me home, I felt a strange reluctance for the evening to end. "I had a wonderful time," I said, as we stood outside my building. "Thank you for dinner." "Thank you for saying yes," Ryan replied. "I know this situation is probably complicated for you." The acknowledgement of complexity hung between us, honest and sobering. "It is," I admitted, "but that doesn't mean it's not worth exploring." Ryan stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "I'd really like to see you again, Michelle." "I'd like that too." When he kissed me goodnight, soft and tentative, it felt like crossing a threshold I hadn't even realized I'd been approaching. As I watched him drive away, I knew there was no going back to the safe, predictable routine I'd built for myself. Whatever this was between us, it was real. And that scared me almost as much as it thrilled me. 3 weeks into whatever Ryan and I were calling our relationship, reality came knocking in the form of my ex-husband David standing in my office lobby on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I looked up from my laptop to find him there, still tall and imposing in his expensive suit, still carrying himself with the kind of confidence that had initially attracted me 25 years ago. "Hello, Michelle," he said, as if showing up unannounced at my workplace was perfectly normal. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My assistant Rebecca looked at me with raised eyebrows, clearly sensing tension. "It's fine," I told her, though my stomach had already knotted itself into an uncomfortable twist. "David, let's go to my office." He followed me down the hall, and I found myself acutely aware of how he filled the space, how his presence seemed to shrink everything around him. It had been 6 months since I'd seen him last, at some mutual friend's anniversary party where we'd exchanged polite small talk and careful distance. "Your office looks good," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "Business must be going well." "It is. What do you want, David?" His smile was the same one he'd used during our marriage when he was about to ask for something he knew I wouldn't want to give. "Can't I just visit my ex-wife to see how she's doing?" "You could, but you won't. So again, what do you want?" David leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I heard something interesting at the club last weekend. Jerry Morrison mentioned seeing you at that new restaurant in the Pearl District with a younger man." The knot in my stomach tightened. Jerry Morrison was David's golf partner and one of Portland's most notorious gossips. Of course, he'd been at the restaurant that night. Of course he'd noticed. "My personal life isn't really your concern anymore," I said, keeping my voice level. It is when it affects our mutual friends. People are talking, Michelle. They're saying you're going through some kind of midlife crisis, dating men young enough to be your son. The accusation hit exactly where David intended it to. Ryan is 35, not 25. And even if he were, it wouldn't be any of your business. Ryan, David repeated, as if testing the name. The baker Jerry mentioned. Michelle, come on. You're a successful professional woman. What are you doing with someone who makes bread? For a living? The dismissive tone in his voice ignited something fierce in my chest. I'm enjoying the company of someone who treats me with respect and genuine interest. You remember what that's like, don't you? David's jaw tightened. This isn't about us. This is about you making choices that could damage your reputation, our reputation. We don't have a reputation together anymore. We're divorced, remember? You made sure of that when you decided our marriage was too boring for your taste. That's not fair, isn't it? I stood up, suddenly needing the advantage of height. You ended our marriage because you wanted excitement, adventure, a chance to feel young again. Now I'm finding my own version of those things, and you have a problem with it? David stood as well, moving closer to my desk. That's different. I never dated anyone inappropriate. Inappropriate how, exactly? Because he's younger? Because he doesn't wear a suit to work? Because he chose passion over profit? Because he's using you, David said bluntly. Come on, Michelle. What does a 35-year-old man want with a 53-year-old woman except someone to help launch his career? You're successful, connected, financially stable. You're the perfect mentor with benefits. The words hit like physical blows, each one landing on insecurities I'd been trying to ignore. Get out, I said quietly. Michelle, I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to control me. Just like you always did. Get out of my office. David studied my face for a long moment, then shook his head. Fine, but when this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. After he left, I sat alone in my office, his words echoing in my head. Was Ryan using me? The thought had occurred to me before, usually in the small hours of the morning when doubt crept in alongside insomnia. He was building a business, facing financial challenges, navigating an industry where connections mattered. I was established, successful, exactly the kind of person who could open doors for him. But then, I remembered the way he looked at me when I tasted his bread that first day, the genuine interest in his voice when he asked about my life, the careful way he'd planned our dinner date. David's cynicism felt like poison, but it was poison, that fed on fears I'd already been harboring. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Hope you're having a good day. Thinking about you. The simple message should have made me smile. Instead, it made me wonder what he was really thinking about. My connections? My potential as an investor? The business advice I'd already given him? I spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, snapping at Rebecca over minor issues and struggling to focus on client presentations. By 5 o'clock, I felt like I was crawling out of my own skin. Lisa found me at home that evening, sitting on my couch with a glass of wine and the expression that must have broadcast my mood from the hallway. What happened? She asked, settling beside me. You look like someone died. I told her about David's visit, his accusations, the doubts that had been eating at me all afternoon. Lisa listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. That manipulative bastard, she said when I finished. He can't stand that you're happy. But what if he's right? What if Ryan is just using me? Is that what your gut tells you? I considered the question seriously. No. When I'm with Ryan, it feels real. But David's voice is so loud in my head now. Of course it is. He spent 22 years training you to doubt yourself. Lisa turned to face me fully. Tell me something. When you're with Ryan, do you feel like yourself? Or do you feel like you're performing some version of yourself? The question caught me off guard. I feel like myself. Maybe the best version of myself. And when you were married to David? I thought about the careful choreography of our marriage, the way I'd learned to anticipate his moods, adjust my opinions to match his, shrink myself to fit the space he allowed me. I felt like I was always auditioning for a role I never quite landed. Exactly. So whose opinion matters more? The man who made you feel small for 2 decades, or your own experience with someone who makes you feel expansive? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Ryan's name appeared on the screen, and I felt the familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with new uncertainty. "Hi," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hey, beautiful. I was wondering if you wanted to grab dinner tonight." I found this new Thai place that's supposed to be incredible. The casual endearment that usually warmed me now felt suspect. Was it genuine affection or calculated charm? "Actually, I'm pretty tired tonight. Rain check?" There was a pause. "Of course. Everything okay? You sound a little off." "Just a long day at work." "Anything you want to talk about?" The genuine concern in his voice almost broke my resolve. "No, I'm fine. I'll call you tomorrow." After I hung up, Lisa was watching me with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "You're going to sabotage this, aren't you?" "I'm being realistic." "You're being scared. There's a difference." The weekend passed in a strange bubble of avoidance. Ryan called twice, texted several times, each message warmer and more concerned than the last. I responded with polite deflection, claiming work stress and family obligations. By Sunday evening, I could feel his confusion through the phone. "Michelle, did I do something wrong?" he asked during our brief call. "Because if I did, I'd rather you just tell me than have us play this guessing game." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said, hating how true it was. "I just need some space to think." "Think about what?" How could I explain David's poison without sounding paranoid? How could I voice my fears without revealing how deeply they cut? "About whether this is smart, for either of us." "I see." His voice had gone carefully neutral. "And is this thinking something we do together, or something you do alone while... I wonder what happened to the woman who asked me to coffee?" The question hung between us, honest and painful. "I don't know," I admitted. "Well, when you figure it out, let me know. Because I care about you, Michelle. More than I probably should after just a few weeks. But I can't keep feeling like I'm chasing shadows." After he hung up, I sat in my living room watching rain streak down the windows, wondering when self-protection had started feeling so much like self-destruction. David's words circled in my head like vultures, picking at every moment of happiness I'd felt with Ryan. But underneath the doubt, a small voice persisted. The voice that remembered how Ryan's face lit up when he saw me at the farmer's market. The voice that recalled his nervous energy on our first dinner date. The way he'd ask Derek for advice because he wanted everything to be perfect. The voice that knew the difference between calculation and genuine feeling. The question was whether I was brave enough to listen to it. The silence stretched between Ryan and me for 5 days, each hour feeling heavier than the last. I threw myself into work with desperate intensity, taking on new clients and staying late enough that Rebecca started leaving concerned notes on my desk. But no amount of professional accomplishment could quiet the war raging in my head between David's cynical warnings and my own heart's stubborn insistence that what Ryan and I shared was real. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Tony Marchetti, the owner of the Italian restaurant where Ryan had taken me for our second date, stood in my lobby looking uncomfortable in his flour-stained chef's coat. "Mrs. Williams?" he said, his accent thickening with nervousness. "I hope you don't mind me coming here. Ryan gave me your business card when he asked about planning something special for you." My heart stuttered. What kind of something special? Tony's weathered face broke into a smile. He wanted to rent my private dining room for next weekend. Very romantic, he said. Flowers, candles, the works. He's been calling every day to adjust the menu, making sure every detail would be perfect for you. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been pulling away, convinced of his ulterior motives, Ryan had been planning a romantic evening that probably cost more than he could afford. But, Tony continued, his expression growing concerned, he called this morning to cancel everything. Said plans had changed. He sounded very sad, Mrs. Williams, like a man whose heart is breaking. After Tony left, I sat alone in my office, finally understanding the full magnitude of what I'd done. David's poison had worked exactly as he'd intended, turning my fears against the one person who'd made me feel truly alive in years. I called Lisa, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened. "You need to fix this," she said without hesitation. "Right now, before you lose something real because of something David said. What if it's too late? What if I've already ruined everything? Then you'll know you tried. But Michelle, if you don't fight for this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." I found Ryan at the shared commercial kitchen where he did his prep work, arriving just as the evening shift was winding down. Through the industrial windows, I could see him kneading dough with mechanical precision, his usual joy in the work replaced by something that looked like resignation. When I knocked on the door, his head jerked up in surprise. For a moment, hope flickered across his face before being quickly replaced by wariness. "Michelle," he said, wiping his hands on his apron, "what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," I said, the words tumbling out before I lost my nerve. "And to explain, and to tell you that I've been an idiot." Ryan studied my face for a long moment, then gestured toward a small office area in the back of the kitchen. "We should probably talk somewhere private." The tiny space smelled like yeast and vanilla, comforting scents that made my chest ache, with regret. Ryan leaned against the desk, arms crossed, waiting. "My ex-husband came to see me last week," I began, then told him everything. David's visit, his accusations, the way old insecurities had rushed back to overwhelm my better judgment. Ryan listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So you believed him," he said when I finished. "You thought I was using you." "Not believed exactly, but doubted. And I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry." "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why did his opinion matter more than your own experience with me?" The question cut to the heart of everything I'd been afraid to examine. "Because I've been married to someone who made me feel like my judgment couldn't be trusted. For 22 years, David convinced me that my instincts were wrong, that I needed his guidance to navigate the world. Even 3 years after our divorce, his voice in my head is louder than my own." Ryan's expression softened slightly. "That's not your fault, Michelle, but it's not fair to me either. I know, and I know I hurt you. Tony came to see me today, told me about the dinner you were planning." Ryan's cheeks flushed. "I wanted to do something special, to show you that this meant something to me." "It means something to me too, more than I was brave enough to admit." "Does it?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're looking for reasons to run every time things get real between us." His words stung because they were true. "You're right. I am scared. Terrified, actually." "Of what?" I took a deep breath, knowing this moment required complete honesty. "Of being hurt again. Of looking foolish. Of falling for someone who might decide I'm too old, too set in my ways, too complicated. Of David being right about anything. And what are you scared I'm thinking? That I'm a lonely divorcee having a midlife crisis. That you're settling for someone convenient until something better comes along. That the age difference will eventually matter more than whatever connection we have now." Ryan was quiet for a long moment, processing my fears. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Michelle, I'm not David. I'm not some 25-year-old looking for a sugar mama or a midlife adventure. I'm a grown man who finds you intelligent, beautiful, and fascinating. Your age isn't something I'm overlooking or tolerating. It's part of what makes you who you are. But what about the future? What happens when what? When you get older? So will I. When people judge us? They already do. When we face challenges? We'll face them together, or we won't. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, smell the familiar scent of flour and soap on his skin. I can't promise you that this will work out perfectly, he continued. I can't promise that. We won't hurt each other or that external pressures won't test us. But I can promise that my feelings for you are real. Not calculated, not opportunistic, not a phase I'm going through. How can you be so sure? Because when I'm with you, I feel like the best version of myself. Because you challenge me intellectually and support my dreams without trying to control them. Because when you smile at me, really smile, it's like the sun coming out after weeks of rain. Tears blurred my vision as the truth of his words settled into my chest. I feel the same way. That's what scared me so much. So what do we do now? I looked at this man who'd somehow managed to see past my defenses to the woman I'd forgotten I could be. We try. We're honest with each other about our fears instead of letting them drive us apart. We don't let other people's opinions matter more than our own experience. And David? David doesn't get a vote in my happiness anymore. Ryan smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since I'd walked into the kitchen. Does this mean you might be interested in that dinner I was planning? Because I may have to call Tony and grovel to get the reservation back. I would love that dinner. But first, I owe you something. What's that? I stepped closer, close enough to rest my hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my palms. A real answer to your question from that first day at the farmer's market. Which question? When I said I was 53 and asked if that was a deal breaker. You said it wasn't, but I never told you why it shouldn't be. Ryan's eyes darkened with interest. Why shouldn't it be? Because I know who I am now in ways I didn't at 30 or 40. Because I'm not looking for someone to complete me or fix me or define me. Because I can love freely without the desperate need I had when I was younger. Because I've learned that real connection isn't about matching demographics, it's about matching souls. And do we match souls? I thought about the easy conversation. On our first coffee date, the way he listened when I talked about my work, the comfortable silence during our dinner together. I thought about how he made me laugh, how he challenged me to be brave, how he saw strength where I saw flaws. I think we might, I said softly. When he kissed me this time, it felt different from our careful goodnight kiss after dinner. This kiss was a promise, a commitment to trying, a declaration that some connections are worth fighting for regardless of what other people think. As we broke apart, Ryan rested his forehead against mine. So, dinner Friday night? Private dining room? Candles? The full romantic gesture? Friday night sounds perfect. Good, because I've been planning this menu for a week and I really want to see if my risotto impresses you as much as my bread did. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in days. Your bread set a pretty high bar. Challenge accepted. Walking out of the kitchen that night, hand in hand with Ryan, I realized that David had been wrong about almost everything. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a desperate attempt to feel young again. This was what happened when you finally learned to trust your own heart over other people's fears. The age difference between Ryan and me would always exist. People would always have opinions about it. There would be challenges we'd have to navigate that other couples might not face. But standing there with his hand warm in mine, those obstacles felt manageable rather than insurmountable. Because love, real love, isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into the life you've already built. It's about finding someone worth building a new life with, regardless of the timeline society expects or the path other people think you should take. 6 months later, when Ryan officially opened his bakery with my marketing expertise and emotional support, the local newspaper ran a feature story about his journey from corporate America to artisan bread maker. In the photo that accompanied the article, we were standing behind the counter together, flour on our aprons and genuine joy on our faces. David never did understand what I saw in Ryan, but that was okay. It wasn't David's story to understand anymore. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.